Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that's way bigger than just another tech headline. We're talking about the next 100 years, who's going to run the world, who's going to get left behind, and what that means for your job, your paycheck, and the way you live. This is about artificial intelligence, AI, and it's already reshaping everything faster than most people can even process. Right now, the global AI game is basically a two-player match between the United States and China. Everyone else, they're not even at the table. They don't have a chair, they don't have a plate, and they sure as hell don't have a knife. Now, I know some folks say we won't feel the full impact of AI for years. But let me tell you, what we're already seeing is nothing short of a demolition derby on the old world order. In my observation, the shock and comprehensive reshaping of human society by AI, even though its deepest impacts might take a few more years for us to fully see, just based on what's already unfolding and the destructive force it's showing. No matter how harshly you judge it, you still wouldn't be overstating it. We have to be brutally clear about one fact: the AI era is fundamentally, qualitatively different from everything we've experienced before. Steam engines, electricity, the internet. Its sudden arrival and the earth-shattering changes it brings will cut deeper and reshape the power structures of human society more thoroughly than all the previous industrial revolutions combined. Why am I bold enough to make that call? Because if we look back, every past industrial revolution, whether it was Watt's steam engine or later the internal combustion engine or electric motors, they all solved the same basic problem. Power, they were about extending our physical strength, using the brute force of steel and machinery to replace human muscle and free us from heavy manual labor. But AI is completely different. It's going after the one thing we humans pride ourselves on most: decision-making itself. It's literally giving real intelligence to cold, dead matter. And on top of that, the human brain has limited memory and processing power. It gets tired, it forgets. But AI, in many narrow fields, has already surpassed the limits of any single one of us. In theory, once you have mature AI algorithms, every single thing in this world, from your refrigerator to the car on the road to a city's traffic management system, would all essentially have a tireless superbrain running them. With that kind of AI brain, production lines no longer need tens of thousands of workers doing repetitive manual operations. Equipment will autonomously arrange production tasks based on orders. Urban governance will no longer rely entirely on bureaucratic manual scheduling and rule of thumb experience. Systems will optimize water, power, traffic, and police resources in real time. And even in the most intimate realm of human emotional companionship, the arrival of increasingly lifelike smart companion robots could completely upend traditional family structures and human relationships. This kind of century-scale transformation, where the entire physical world suddenly gains the ability to think and act on its own, is a leap that human civilization has never experienced in its entire evolutionary history. Right here in this critical month of June 2026, according to multiple international mainstream media outlets and education strategy research institutions. Their analysis reports all point to the same conclusion: AI is reshaping the way human knowledge is produced at wildfire speed. This is no longer just a technological upgrade, it's a wholesale reshuffling of civilization, more violent than the Industrial Revolution and more thorough than the birth of the internet. Some radical scholars have even defined this new era as the Silicon Big Bang, a brand new epoch belonging to silicon chip intelligence. And I think that's no exaggeration. Those academic terms from the ivory tower are now turning, one by one, into the brutal reality unfolding right in front of our eyes yet. Just as this force powerful enough to shake the very foundations of nations is barely getting started. And while everyone's still hotly debating it, the brutal landscape of global competition has already contracted sharply and savagely. The South China Morning Post out of Hong Kong recently published a very thought-provoking analysis, and they laid out an extremely cruel fact in the current AI domain dominated by China and the United States. The so-called middle powers and their cherished dreams of technological sovereignty. Turns out, from the very beginning, that was nothing but a self-soothing illusion. Even though the EU and other established economies are jumping up and down in panic, repeatedly pushing for their own independent AI sovereignty. Most analysts on the surface believe these countries are severely lacking in genuine autonomy at key tech nodes and supply chain links, and they can no longer shake the G2 dominance that China and the US have formed in the AI race. And that cold, hard verdict, as time goes by, hasn't aged a bit. In fact, it's only looking more accurate, more precise by the day. Cross-verification from international think tanks circulating across the internet also confirms that China's lead in the AI space isn't shrinking, it's actually widening. The world's top talent, hot money capital, and core data are all converging on these two frontrunners at an unprecedented pace. Now, at this point, you might be asking, why is it that in this great AI contest, something we haven't seen in 1,000 years, why is it that when the cards are finally dealt, only China and the US are left at the table? Don't other countries, Japan, Germany, the UK, don't they want a piece of the action? The answer is so simple, it's almost depressing. It's not that they don't want to, they want to badly. Many of them have already poured in huge sums and shouted loud slogans, fighting like hell. But here's the one truth, they simply cannot afford to play this high-stakes game. Artificial intelligence is the ultimate killing field, where 4 dimensions, capital intensity, talent density, technological depth, and industrial breadth converge at the highest level. It's the most expensive, most complex tech arms race in human history. And on this planet, at this stage, the only countries that can simultaneously mobilize truly scary amounts of capital, gather the world's brightest minds, master core technologies, and possess a complete and massive industrial base to support real-world deployment, objectively speaking, are really just China and the United States. Every other country that tries to compete has at least one fatal structural shortcoming, if not more. Let's start with the first point. Capital intensity AI is a textbook, unadulterated money-devouring monster to train a large language model with hundreds of billions of parameters. Just one single training run can cost several $100 million. And that's not even counting the pre-research and development burn rate. According to in-depth reports from multiple authoritative financial media outlets like Economic Observer Network, the AI industry has now, without any doubt, entered a super capital era of heavy assets and long cycles. The global investment scale just for AI infrastructure alone has already reached a jaw-dropping trillion-dollar level. This kind of continuous black hole-like torrent of capital, looking around the world, only the tech giants of China and the US, backed by their powerful state capital systems, can barely sustain this war of attrition. As for Europe, Japan, and South Korea, either their capital structures are too fragmented and risk-averse, or their overall scale is simply insufficient to independently support a decade-long technological long march. Second point, talent density. AI is not about building houses. You can't just throw money at it. You need the smartest brains on the planet. In terms of the top-tier researchers, the best engineers, and the most visionary product managers in this field, just the numbers that China and the US each possess already account for the vast majority of the global total. If you look at the most prestigious international academic conferences like NeurIPS and ICML, the papers published from both countries are running neck and neck, fiercely competing. Silicon Valley has a century-old global talent magnet effect. It's had every advantage. But China, in just over a decade, has already cultivated the world's largest reservoir of STEM talent. The number of engineers they graduate every year is several times that of the United States. In the AI battlefield, without hundreds of thousands of AI engineers working in coordination and cross-stimulating each other's thinking, relying on just a handful of geniuses making scattered breakthroughs in labs, can never build a complete, self-sustaining AI industrial ecosystem. Third point, technological depth from the bottom-level math algorithms and deep learning framework construction, to the AI chip design that determines compute limits, to the massive data cleaning, labeling, and processing. This is an incredibly intricate, deeply divided, and unimaginably long terror supply chain. No question about it, the United States still holds the lead in semiconductor basic science, foundational architecture design, and the most advanced logic process chips. Controlling the upstream narrative, but China, on the applied tech side, in machine vision recognition rates, natural language understanding, and the toughest part, end product cost control, has shown astonishing explosive power and staying power. Their domestically developed large models now rival America's top models in many real-world benchmark tests. As for other countries, either they don't have their own deep learning frameworks and can only use other people's open source software, or their language datasets are too small and insufficiently diverse to feed a cutting-edge, general-purpose model. They're left struggling in the cracks between tech dependencies and patent walls. Fourth point, and this is the one I think is the most critical, the most difficult to replicate, and the ultimate moat, industrial breadth. AI can never just be a bunch of engineers locked in a lab writing code. It has to go down to the ground, it has to sink into real-world manufacturing, transportation, medical diagnosis, and agriculture, to find its soul and get the feedback nutrients it needs. Folks, mainland China is the only country in the world that has every single industrial category in the UN industrial classification. Not a single one missing across the global statistical range of over 500 major industrial products. China ranks number 1 in annual production for more than 220 of them. That's 220 plus industrial products with world-leading production volumes. What does that mean? It means they have the world's most complete, most complex, and most massive real economy application scenarios. That gives AI an unparalleled real-world testing ground and instant, massive scale iterative data. A flexible manufacturing algorithm can be verified, debugged, and optimized in just days across tens of thousands of factories in the Yangtze River Delta or the Pearl River Delta. The US also has a huge service sector and high-tech ecosystem. It can plug AI into finance, entertainment, biopharma, and other high-end services quickly, but when you look at those so-called middle powers, either their manufacturing has long been hollowed out, or their digital markets are too fragmented, and domestic demand too small. They lack this kind of large-scale, low-cost, high-tolerance real-world proving ground. So at the end of the day, whether it's total population, industrial thickness, or market capacity, none of them can support independently training a high-quality, usable general-purpose large model. So even though we have recently seen Japan plan to invest 1 trillion yen over 5 years, India's PM shouting about becoming an AI superpower, Canada rolling out a 2 billion Canadian dollar national strategy, and the EU urgently pushing its so-called tech sovereignty plan. In my view, all these frantic efforts look more like shouting at the waves and pumping themselves up. Rather than building a real arc that can actually ride those waves into the future, they might scrape together the first pot of money for now, but they're inherently missing a complete ecosystem that can connect upstream research and development, midstream system integration, and downstream industrial applications. This congenital chasm won't shrink over time. It'll only grow wider, eventually leaving them completely in the dust. Now, after we've identified all the players at the table, let's slice up this massive AI cake and see what it's really made of. In my view, the first round and the most fundamental, most fertile slice consists of 3 upstream hardcore industries. Electricity, large models, and computing infrastructure. These 3 industries make up the water, soil, and air that the AI world depends on to survive. Let's start with electricity. Don't forget, the end game of AI is energy, according to a detailed report from China's State Grid Energy Research Institute. By 2030, just the total electricity consumption of data centers in China alone will account for over 6% of the entire society's total power usage. A single mid-sized smart computing center, the amount of electricity it consumes in a year is actually comparable to the combined residential and industrial power use of a small city. Without sufficient, cheap, and stably sourced green power, no matter how much you brag about your compute capacity, it's like a boat without water, a tree without roots. In the electricity sector, I can confidently say China has an overwhelming, unmatched edge. According to the latest data released by China's National Energy Administration, the country's total installed power generation capacity has soared to 3,960 gigawatts. And among that, hydropower, wind power, and solar power, all 3 of these green energy categories, rank number 1 in the world individually. And their combined share has already exceeded half of the country's total installed capacity. Even more critically, their globally unique ultra-high voltage transmission technology can deliver surplus green power from the far western regions to the massive computing hubs along the eastern coast with extremely low transmission loss. Now compare that to the US. Our grid infrastructure is old, deeply fragmented, and each state does its own thing. Europe, after its reckless anti-nuclear policies, has seen power prices skyrocket to the point where industry can barely afford it. Japan and India have been stuck for decades in a strategic quagmire of heavy energy dependence. No energy sovereignty, then talking about AI sovereignty is nothing but a joke. So in the long-term AI competition, I believe China has tremendous staying power, while the US. Right now, our infrastructure is at best just barely adequate for the moment. Second, let's look at large models. This is the true brain center of the AI world. Currently, the globally recognized first-tier large model products, like America's OpenAI GPT series, Google's Gemini, and China's homegrown DeepSeek, ByteDance's Dubal, Alibaba's Tongyi Chenwen, Tencent's Hunyuan Batis Wengxin Yin, and others. have basically formed a two-block face-off between China and the US. What's particularly worth watching is that China's large models in deep understanding of Chinese semantics, and even more so in vertical industry applications, are actually demonstrating more practical capability than their American counterparts in some areas. Thanks to rapid deployment across their massive industrial base, diverse enterprise-level integrations, and deep ecosystem fusion, China's lead in multiple AI fields is continuing to widen. Other countries, though, they've rolled out a few models just to save face. When you look at the scientific rigor of their parameter scales, the efficiency of their training costs, and the real-world test results in actual usage scenarios, the gap with the top Chinese and American models is so huge it's almost laughable. The brutal competition in large models follows a perfect winner-take-all Matthew effect. The more data and user feedback you accumulate, the faster and stronger your model iteration becomes. A single country, small market, and poor data volume simply can't get into that positive flywheel cycle that requires massive momentum to start. In the top-tier large model arena, the pattern is already set. China and the US stand as the two giants, while every other country can only watch from the sidelines. China might be slightly behind the US in some basic science areas, but that gap, from what I can see right now, is just a matter of a few months of catch-up time at most. Finally, let's talk about compute. This is the muscle that the AI world uses to show its power, mainly consisting of high-end AI chips and large-scale smart computing centers. The US still holds an undisputed advantage in the design and mass production of high-end AI training chips. NVIDIA's products are still the standard equipment for training super large models. But, and this is a big but, China is now mobilizing its entire national strength to build its own independent compute system that isn't subject to anyone else's control. The government-led National Integrated Circuit Industry Investment Fund, in its third phase alone, injected a staggering 344 billion yuan, which translates to roughly 50 billion US dollars. With its sights squarely set on domestic substitution for compute infrastructure, that's open, confirmed, and impossible to ignore. Huawei's Ascend series, Cambricon, and other domestic AI chips are already being widely deployed in inference and even mid to low-end training applications at commercial scale. And they're accelerating their push into the advanced process nodes that the US is trying to block. In terms of total compute scale, according to official data from the China Academy of Information and Communications Technology, the total number of standard computing center racks currently in operation in China has exceeded 13.73 million, and their total computing power ranks second in the world. But the key differentiator is this: China has the world's largest domestic market and an unmatched complete industrial chain, which together can effectively amortize and support the massive research and development costs of continuous chip iteration and upgrades. Any other country, they have neither the independent design and manufacturing capability for high-end chips, nor the huge market demand needed to absorb the expensive upfront research and development costs. In reality, they've already been locked firmly outside the core AI circle. They can't even get a ticket to the game when we've thoroughly examined these three critical foundational industries. The conclusion is as clear as a card laid face up on the table. China has all three, and in stable power supply and industrial application scale, they have an overwhelming, crushing advantage. The US has the latter too. The high ground in large models and compute, and the other countries, well, exactly as that sharp South China Morning Post editorial put it, all they have is an illusion of sovereignty. They can't even secure a single one of these pillar industries to stand on. So what right do they have to talk about becoming a major power? Now, in this high-stakes century-defining gamble dominated by the US and China, are all the other countries just going to throw up their hands and wait to be swallowed by this giant wave? Not entirely, they're not completely without a chance. Their faint hope lies in the second half of the AI game, the application layer, what I call AI and Iron Plaque. But even in this supposedly lower barrier area, they're facing a starkly divided fate. Take those traditional developed country allies that usually listen to the US, they're facing a brutal reality. Because the US model of exporting AI services is incredibly expensive, loaded with capital calculations at every turn. Take Microsoft's Copilot, for example. That kind of enterprise-level AI solution costs thousands of dollars per user per year in subscription fees. This kind of sky-high compute cost, plus the premium from a closed commercial ecosystem, means that the US is using AI as an invisible super straw to suck out the industrial blood and trade secrets of its allied countries. Those traditional European industrial powers, already staggering from energy crises and manufacturing outsourcing, after being forced to pay these insane AI service fees to the US, will only see their own competitiveness drain away further, hollowed out even more. This is absolutely not some fair empowerment. This is naked, systematic economic weakening. As for the vast number of emerging economies and developing countries, China's AI export model is based on relative affordability and mutual benefit, and pay attention, I'm using that keyword affordability. Behind this is actually China's forward-looking deployment of digital infrastructure under the Belt and Road framework from years ago. Fiber optic cables from FiberHome, base station equipment from Huawei, and solar panels that are cheap and everywhere. They've already laid down a dual-track information and energy highway across the vast African continent, the island nations of Southeast Asia, the interior of Central Asia, and the Middle Eastern deserts. Built on this solid foundation, China's large AI models are now going international in a customized, low-cost, and technologically open-friendly way. For example, China's Aflytech cooperated with Saudi Arabian institutions to develop an Arabic language AI customer service and government service guidance model. And the total build and maintenance cost was far lower than the closed solutions offered by European and American firms. Even in Abu Dhabi, Chinese smart traffic signaling and flow control solutions have quietly been deployed, improving local congestion problems. This isn't just selling software, it's packaging the seeds of AI technology together with the water, power, and internet needed to irrigate it, a full infrastructure bundle, and delivering it to those emerging nations that desperately want modernization but don't want to be financially harvested by a single hegemon. So, the future global AI power map, in my view, is already clear as day. The US holds on to the most cutting edge and most profitable pieces, trying to maintain an elite club controlled by top-tier Wall Street capital and Silicon Valley tech oligarchs through high-tech walls and closed ecological fences. China, on the other hand, is taking a completely different approach, spreading a massive cooperation network that covers the entire global south and even the vast Eurasian hinterland, using their solid power infrastructure, abundant compute resources, and powerful general-purpose large model foundation to connect with localized applications across all industries, attempting to build a self-sustaining, self-reinforcing AI ecosystem. In this Chinese ecosystem, data grows with openness, models get stronger with more data. Real industries get more solid with AI, and energy networks expand with demand. In stark contrast, America's wealthy allied nations in the future, they're highly likely to be caught in a painful tug of war between being price gouged and being forced into submission. Meanwhile, those countries that choose to build AI tech ties with China, especially the emerging markets, stand a genuine chance to get a once-in-a-lifetime leapfrog opportunity. This AI cooperation model, based on physical infrastructure, emphasizing fair empowerment, and without attached political strings, is using Chinese shovels to fill in one tech gap after another that the West once considered permanent. I'll make a bold prediction. In the future, this world will be split into two entirely different universes because of AI. One is a highly financialized, expensive AI empire where compute is hoarded by a tiny minority. The other is a down-to-earth, inclusive AI commonwealth where the real economy and digital tech are deeply intertwined, allowing thousands of industries to improve their own efficiency. The former, because it's closed and expensive, is hard to replicate. The latter, because it's open and grounded, is hard to surpass. Today, we've already seen with our own eyes that under the US-dominated expensive AI service model, some developed countries are using their own hard-earned national capital by buying American AI tech to continuously feed a distant California-based capital hub that's constantly centralizing power. Their own valuable industrial data is being exported. Their own innovation capacity is withering as their markets get monopolized and service costs rise. This is absolutely not a path to prosperity. This is using their own hands to accelerate their own weakening and marginalization. Exactly the opposite the open AI ecosystem promoted and driven by China. In its essence, is spreading the most advanced productive forces as fire seeds broadly into the forests of thousands of industries, thereby stimulating a broader, more dynamic end market of creation and consumption. Global wealth and power are quietly but breathtakingly being redistributed through this omnipresent AI superchannel without a single shot fired. Those old developed nations living off their past glory, their relative decline will start the very moment humanity truly steps into the AI age. And that decline is being cruelly accelerated. This brutal long-term trend will not be changed by any politician's personal will or slogans. Folks, whether you like it or not, whether you accept it or not, we are standing at a critical historical juncture that will decide the global order for the next 100 years. Mainland China has read the game, seen the players, and knows exactly what chips and advantages it holds in its own hand. What's left, regardless of all the noise from outside, is to push forward its strategy with unwavering resolve. If a cutting-edge technology is not used to serve the broadest masses of society, if it's not used to narrow the gap between rich and poor and close the digital divide, then it fundamentally betrays the original purpose of civilizational progress. Right now, China is using the world's most solid industrial manufacturing capability, the most abundant and stable energy supply, the most massive and diverse application scenarios, and the most determined resolve for independent innovation to make that future AI fortune, the biggest wealth pie of human society, not only enormous but also rock solid, and to let people in more developing countries actually get a bite and get full. That right there is the core competitiveness that mainland China is showing in the AI era. And that's the fundamental dividing line between them and every other nation, facing this magnificent historical opportunity. Here in Taiwan, though we operate under a different political system, we absolutely cannot keep looking across the strait with a frog at the bottom of a well perspective. We have to keep our cool, observe soberly, humbly understand this unstoppable tech tsunami, and also think hard about our own positioning and response. Otherwise, in this brutal global survival competition, we'll get crushed by the wheels of the era without mercy. That's my full analysis for today. Thanks for hanging in there with me. If you like my channel, please hit like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who cares about the big picture. For more deep dive perspectives and real-time insights, I'll catch you next time. Peace.